So good afternoon and a very warm welcome to this special lecture, which is part of our cloud computing seminar series. We are absolutely delighted to have as our distinguished speaker, Professor Yannis Ioannidis, Senior Database Researcher at the University of Athens. Yannis is a household name in the information management research area, thanks to his highly creative seminal contributions over a multitude of research topics, including scientific data management, relational query processing, data personalization, data warehousing, and data science. Over the past decade, Yannis and his team have moved into the new and intriguing area of digital storytelling, which he'll cover in today's talk. So Yannis received his undergraduate degree from the National Technical University at Athens. He then moved to the US, where he got a master's first at Harvard, and then he moved to California, Berkeley, where he received his PhD under Eugene Wong. Immediately thereafter, he came over to the cold weather of the University of Wisconsin in Madison, where he joined the celebrated database group. And on a personal note, I was fortunate to be able to take courses with him at that time. And then after spending about 12 years of Madison winters, he finally decided to go back to Greece and join his current position. So, as should be expected, given his numerous contributions to the field, Yannis has received a host of awards and distinctions throughout his career. So I won't bother to enumerate all of them here. I'll just highlight two of them. He's a fellow of both IEEE and ACM. Moreover, just last June, Yannis was elected as the president of ACM Worldwide. And actually, it is in this context that his current visit to India is occurring. He'll be attending the ACM India annual event, which is going to be held tomorrow and day after in Bhopal. So, Yannis has actually visited IISc previously. Okay? Most of you are too young to probably remember that. This was in 1996, 27 years back, as he told me this morning. Okay? And he then gave a talk on scientific data management. So, we are delighted to have him again in our midst and hope there'll be several more such visits. So with that brief introduction to Yannis' story, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jayant. It is a great pleasure to be back 27 years afterwards. And I want to come back again, but not in yet another 27 years. I hope to still be alive in 27 years, but I want to be coming back much sooner. I was also part of your defense committee. So yes, partly a little corner you owe to me that you have Jayant here making wonders. And yes, it's the newest thing is that I'm the president of ACM. I assume, Jayant, that everyone is an ACM member here. I won't check. But anyway, you should be, and if you want to, I want to learn, not just about ACM, but also the needs and that you may have here at IISc or generally in India, because ACM is a global organization. Yes, it's headquartered in New York, but it has a president in Athens, Greece, who today is in India. So it's a round global thing, and the more we understand each other, the more we'll be able to do about each other. So there is the ACM chapter, various chapters of IISc in the area, and it will be great if I see most of you, if not all of you there. Okay, Jayant said that this is a seminar of cloud computing, okay, and that I have done all these wonderful things in databases. Well, today's talk has nothing to do with cloud, maybe even nothing to do with computing, and certainly nothing with databases. Although most of my work, I continue to do it with data management, data organization, data processing, data science. About 10 years ago, I stumbled upon one issue. I got excited, probably because I had also worked on recommendation and personalization database earlier. But and I went into it from that perspective, but then the whole thing, it opened up a wonderful world very unfamiliar to me, and with my team, with that part of my team anyway, we're trying to figure out what is best. So I'll tell you a few things about the world of storytelling, interactive storytelling, which is a term that is very well established, a conference in interactive digital storytelling and so on and so forth. But the main presentation, the main emphasis is digital story experiences, not just telling, but experiencing, and then for affective management, whatever that may mean. So, as society evolves, a whole bunch of new needs arise. The traditional way of interacting with knowledge, knowing and so learning and so on and so forth, the young generation, but also the old generation, that doesn't really go for it. It's not what works out, is games and virtual things and so on and so forth. So there's a chasm on how much people get engaged with traditional ways and the modern ways. And we can see that also with numbers. And you can see, the video game market for the past few years, it's increasing, 17%. Netflix is moving very fast. Yes, someone said that ChatGPT will move even faster in attracting people, but that's okay. VR market size 17 times in 8 years. So it's obvious that this is what sells. And on the other hand, fiction book sales are down. Penguin says that. So it's obvious that something is happening here. And what is the problem, though? Okay, these are the needs. There is a problem when you look into these two things. If we are to measure, we talked about engagement, and we compared with cost, and of course, cost is getting red. Well, went through the roof, my animation, and engagement. So we want low cost and high engagement. Where do these things go? Well, books are good in terms of cost, but low engagement. Where there are very few literary Nobel laureates that really can make you engage with literature. And these guys are very high on engagement, are also very high cost, and only conglomerates can really produce them. So if you compare these two, there is definitely a gap, a market gap, a research gap, and so on and so forth. What do you do in this space? Something that is, if you want, a better point. So that various organizations that want to interact with people, want to engage people, they want engagement, maybe not that as much, but reasonable engagement, but at a lower cost. And what about a whole bunch of artists and creative people that want to create objects of art to engage people, not a book, not a game or something like this, in this space. And the applications, the need for this exists in many, many areas: culture, education, tourism, advertising, and so on and so forth, and even just pure entertainment. So how do you fill this gap? Well, the answer that we are trying to explore to fill this gap, good engagement, not exciting, but certainly maybe not as, LOL or all the others, but reasonable cost is digital storytelling. And in particular, although what we have been doing is applicable more or less in many of the other areas, we have focused on cultural heritage, and therefore everything that I'll describe here is, in terms of examples and so on, is for culture. Coming from Greece, you can expect that this would be. So digital storytelling, it's a modern extension of the ancient activity of storytelling and practice, and it can happen in many ways. I mean, when you read books, when you're fantasizing, make-believe, and so on and so forth. All this has been happening. Now the word is digital. You use multimedia in whatever form to tell a story, and there are various, this key idea comes in various art forms, and I emphasize the word art. Web novels, movies, special kind of movies where you tell a story, 3D games, virtual reality, and so on and so forth. And what we are talking about, storytelling, well, let's get rid of the telling, story experiences, is a new form of art that we are trying to serve in order to do what? Engage people with the knowledge, the information, the environment, whatever you are trying to convey to them. So engagement is the main goal. You want to grab their attention, get them engaged, and then have them learn something. Have them go out with something. Which something could be personal. I mean, like when you see a painting, different people see the same painting, they come up with different understandings of the painting. And we see this in other forms of art, okay, in a game or in a web movie and so on and so forth. This is a new form of art. Now, what is the issue? How we can approach it for culture? Again, for other things, we can conceptualize it slightly different. But let me give you the key motivation that was for us with respect to culture. And cultural sites and cultural objects and cultural activities exist in many forms. But let's start from museums. When you go to a museum, what does your visit look like? You enter the museum, you go in front of an exhibit, you read a little story in a little plaque, or the audio guide tells you something, or a true guide, a human guide, tells you something, and that's it. Then you go to another exhibit, and then you read another story related to that exhibit, and so on and so forth, unrelated story to the previous one. And so exhibit after exhibit, you have an exhibit-centric visit, and little stories come out of the exhibits that you visit. Well, let's reverse this. Not little stories coming out as side effects of an exhibit-centric visit, but let the exhibits come out as side effects of a story-centric visit. Well, you actually have one story that takes you through a certain way of conceptualizing what this museum is about. So your visit is story-centric. You experience the story in many ways. It's not just storytelling, it's not just a narration of someone in your ears saying something. Yes?
In the usual museums, you find some thematic connection between the various exhibits.
Yes.
In a sense, an inherent story which is already connecting them, although it may not be explicitly stated.
It's usually chronological, or this era or that area, or that era, or here are the paintings, here are the armor, here are the vases, the porcelains, and so on and so forth. Here is Egypt, here is India, here is, if you go to the British Museum, all they have is Greeks and Indians and Egyptians and things like this. So, yes, there is some clustering, but again, it is exhibit-centric, the clustering. It is based on some feature of the objects. Okay. The key thing now is to come up with a story that have characters, there is plot, there is different, it's a multi-channel experience. There's a common thread. This is the key thing, that there's a common thread that takes you through this. You won't see everything in one story, but you'll see some connection that will make you emotionally engaged in some fashion. And that is the key. You want cognitive science, psychology, sociology show that when you get emotionally engaged with something, then you have the biggest interaction, the longest memory, the broadest memory, and so on and so forth. That's the key. I wasn't teaching computer-human interaction in Madison, but one of the I taught it for many years in Athens. One of the first things is about long-term memory and short-term memory when you have your user interface. And in order to remember, if I used to do experiments like in database, but I was doing it in there, where I would show 10 words for 4 seconds. And then I'll remove them and say, how many, write down the words that you remember. And then I would show a little story with the key words being those 10. And then I would ask them to remember. And this is an experiment that has been done by cognitive scientists for many years. And it is a very significant difference on how much people remember. Or I would ask them, a week afterwards, what were the words? And they would remember. So this is what we're doing. Story, common thread. And the key thing is about storytelling. A story brings the perspective of the people of the past, because culture, even today's culture, someone created it an hour ago. So in some sense, it's the smallest past. Of course, usually culture mostly is of the deeper past. And I'll come to this. There's a famous game designer that wrote a book on interactive storytelling. And he said, stories are about people, not about objects. And think of the movies that you've seen. Even those that have furnitures fighting with each other or animals, they are personified. Okay? It's not the objects that have any centers, they don't take the center stage. And of course, now we're talking about digital storytelling, so we can do a whole bunch of things that are not, we couldn't do it in the traditional storytelling. The multimedia, the virtual, the augmented, the gaming, and so on and so forth, whatever you'll come up with. And including, I said a thread. It's a common thread that connects everything, but this thread that you follow may be a choice among multiple threads that you could follow. So when you create a story, could go this way or the other way, depending on many things. Your preferences, the perception of the system, your choices, and so on, and we'll come back to that. So this is the main idea. So I want to return to the word art. So this is, in our mind, a new form of art. It has aspects from many other forms of art, the movies, the theater, participatory theater, especially, games, play narration, and so on and so forth. And the thing is, okay, this is a new form of art. So the Spielbergs of this form of art have not been born yet. Or maybe they have been born, but they don't know that they will be as the Spielberg of this form of art. And in general, remember, we want to fill the gap. Spielberg will be Netflix. What about the middle ground? Creative people, wonderful people, but they don't live in Bollywood or Hollywood or Broadway. How will they do it? And what tools are we going to give them? Because this is digital story experiencing. So this is the work. Two things that we have to be careful about. The examples are from museums, but they're broader. The concepts are broader. We talk about digital image. Great. Now we'll have our yes.
The word digital, does it mean that it excludes physicalization? about museums and the physical aspects are important.
The physical.
Is that excluded in?
You're partly stealing my thunder, okay, which is good. But let me say what I say, and then I'll emphasize it. It's the next. It is this slide actually. When we have our mobile, okay, we're talking about digital storytelling, so something has to happen in digital form. We'll have our mobiles, we'll have our tablets, possibly some other device that will come out. And this is, again, cognitive science and so on, extremely, it is drawing us to it. So images, even just TV, people are couch potatoes. Why? Because the image and the moving image is drawing. It has a great power that we want to harness, but up to a point. Okay, yes, digital storytelling enables us the use of digital assets. They're created, and then you can create multiple stories from it. But overuse could break the original objective, which is engagement. We want to enhance and not replace the physical reality, the on-site experience, if you are in a museum. So look at this picture. This is a real picture. It's not constructed. It's not photoshopped. Okay, here is the masterpiece, and all these children possibly are looking at the same masterpiece on their mobiles or not. So spectacle does not make stories. Okay, we can create the story. It will be visual and auditory and so on and so forth. But the visual thinking should not dominate storytelling itself. Let me say that a story, although I'm emphasizing quite a bit in situ, being there in a museum, but this can be extended. What about part of the story that you experience before you go to the museum, or after you went to the museum, or when you go to another museum and there is a story that can connect you to your previous. So there's many great things that we can do. So make sure that you overcome the power of the digital image, so you use it in a way that makes sense. Here's another cartoon that I really like. Yeah, a museum could be a whole bunch of QR codes, okay? And then you go around and you look at the pieces. Also overcome the power of the object. Because what was the original thing? We want it not to be exhibit-centric. And often, some inflationary define digital storytelling as any multimedia app, okay? And so if you include just purely informational content, no story, no emotion, no people, no actors, and so on and so forth, then you've lost it. I mean, audio guide, yes, it's digital. Well, digital analog. Okay, but there are purely digital audio guides, but they're just information. They're just like the other thing. This is not story. You want the story. And sometimes the objects are so important. I mean, you have the Mona Lisa, or you have Taj Mahal, okay? You want to create a story around Taj Mahal, not to go around and say, this is this ruby and this is the princess and so on. Well, you have to bring in the princess and put her in a story. But if you do this, no, the experience is not a story. And Chris said another wise thing. So the storytelling, story experiencing, in order to create such stories, has many faces that are very much reminiscent of what you do when you create a movie. Okay, you have to write a script. You have to stage it. Well, if you have a museum and you are talking about an experience in situ, then the stage is there. You know where the exhibits are and so on and so forth, and you have to put the story in the appropriate path of where things are. I mean, you won't move the statue because the story is not working out. Okay, it's given. If it's more virtual, then you have more freedom. You have to produce it. You have to take the digital assets, record voices, actors that play the various things, or take pictures, or take 3D pictures, 360 pictures, and so on. Then you need editing. So all this is authoring. And then in the end, of course, online you are experiencing the story that you create. The visitor, the end user, and so on is experiencing that. And our system, our tools is called Nara Live. We call this narration and live. And also it's not taken as a domain. It was not taken, now we have it. Yes?
The pages that you talked about mostly directed towards static setup, meaning like it's not quote unquote interactive. So if interaction is a part of the storytelling, and would those stages change in some way?
It is a few slides down the road.
Okay.
Absolutely, yes.
I'll wait for
yes. I gave a hint, of course, it was to hidden, that given that we have digital, now it's digital storytelling, we are not bound by what traditional storytelling has as bounds. And interaction is a big thing. But there are many types of interactions, and I'll emphasize what is, interaction, and what is really what makes a big difference. Absolutely. It's one of the big dimensions. And you say, now the keyword popped up, interactive digital storytelling. It's very important. I mean, the conference is International Conference on Interactive Digital Storytelling. It is very important. And a whole bunch of other things. And here is, acknowledgement of all the projects that we've had. 1/3 of them, well, roughly half European, half national projects in Greece that have helped us do this work and proceed. Yes?
Is there a specific target demographics that you are trying to address with this? For example, youngsters who are bored by museums, or is it to the general public at large?
It's humanity. Yeah. The type of knowledge that you want people, the appropriate set of people to be engaged in, has no limits. The environment has no limits. And the constituencies that are corresponding has no limits. Okay.
I was wondering, based on your past work on personalization, would the story also be personalized to the consumer of the story?
Yes.
So I had a question. So
Yeah, it's on.
So what you're talking about is like a really expanded version of what someone would experience, say, at Disneyland or Universal Studios, because there is a story. There's all kinds of digital stuff that makes you part of the story. You experience a lot of things, but it is like, of course, limited to some entertainment specific thing. Is that a kind of thing to think about this? Or like the museums or historical places which have old-fashioned sound and light shows, right? Which kind of attempt to make you experience the story. Is it like taking that to a next or the higher level?
Well, I am sort of comparing this work with Disneyland. In some sense, yes. The common thread is not there. There is a context that we all know, who is Donald Duck and who is Goofy and this and that and the other. But then you do rides, and it's entertainment, and it's funny things. There is a moment of joy but I don't think there is engagement, emotional engagement with what you're doing. There's no information to be conveyed. The sound and light is a linear narration, no interaction, okay? And yes, there is a story. It's analog, and if you want, it's a traditional storytelling. Sound and light is a traditional storytelling, of course, with a big stage and lighting and so on and so forth. So yes, you can imagine all of them as expansions of these forms of storytelling, or some form of storytelling even in this land, absolutely. By the way, one of the things that I didn't mention is that in order for this to work, you may want to have music, okay, in the background, or the story calls you to go from one place to the next, and you will be walking for half a minute. What will be happening? That you lose the engagement, you lose the immersion. So how do you do this? Maybe something to give the visitor to think about, or maybe some music is following. So there are a whole bunch of non-technological artistic things that the creative people have to worry about. I mean, here is just a map of the various technologies that we use. This is not important. There is nothing extraordinary here that you can think about. The key thing I want to say is that we have the creators that author. This is the entire platform of Naralive, okay? Currently. The creators that use our authoring tools that create the stories, using also the various digital objects that exist. And then these experiences, the end users use, the platforms that exist in mobile phones or in the web or extended reality, to take these stories that are created by them and experience them. So we have three, if you want, modes: the mobile, the web, and the extended reality. Now, what is the research interest in all this? There are some technological things, but I won't talk about them. Okay. We want what we say we want is engagement. Okay. So this is our target. The end users, the visitors or others, when they experience to be engaged, and at least for culture, but also for other things, there are various things that characterize the experience. Historical empathy, which has many parts. Perspective taking. Am I with the Greeks, or am I with the Turks? Am I with the blacks, or am I with the whites? Am I with the Martians or the Earthians? Affective connection. Can you identify with this? Historical contextualization. So this is happening and that's happening. So a whole bunch of historical empathy. And other things that make you engaged. Believability. I mean, are you bullshitting or it's believable? Enjoyment, sensory delight, and so on. The stories that are produced will be evaluated on these measures. The people, how much they get this. And now the key thing is, what kind of features should a story have? Should stories have in order to achieve this? Should they be interactive? Should they be personalized? Should they have social interaction, and so on and so forth? What are the characteristics that you give to the creative people, on top of which then they will come up with their own scripts and staging and so on and so forth? But studying for this new form of art, what should stories have in order to have something that you want for your end users? Okay? If I had time to animate this, first I will draw this as a goal, and then the thing is what from here gives you this. Okay? And I will, and we have built the narrative tools. I won't show you too many things. We have a story maker. The design editor, which is the mock-up, the quick the concepts that you come up, like in a movie. Then the storyboard editor, where you have all the scenes. The directing, the placemaker, where you put it in space. And then, of course, we have the story player and the experience side. And this is a storyboard editor. You see a story here shows the various script units, and it's not linear. You can have branches and so on and so forth. You identify every branch and you play with it. You also show what kind of digital asset. Will it be an illustration? Will it be a video? Will it be just narration, an audio recording? Here the roles, who says what, and so on and so forth. Tools that the non-Spielberg's creative people can use and come up with nice, reasonable, engaging stories. This part is the thing that we are spending the most time on. How to create tools that capture this connection between the features of stories and placemaker, to put things in a virtual place. If this is a museum and you want to see it virtually, where are the hotspots, or whether it's a web, and so on. Okay. And where's the viewpoint, you say, okay, you have this picture and you say, okay, this will be a hotspot, and when you get there, you will be seeing this and stuff like that. So a whole bunch of work has gone done, and we've written a bunch of stories. Now, we've written through the years many stories for many audiences in many places, and here is about a dozen that I'm putting up. The features that I'm emphasizing here is narration, so just coming up with a narration, linear story, the interaction, very important, sociality, personalization. I'll talk about stories of these three. I don't know if I'll have time because I forgot my watch. And here are the names. Here's where we develop them. You see in the beginning, the first two stories that we wrote, it was just narration, no interaction, no sociality, and so on and so forth. And afterwards, we keep having this, but we add more features because we see, and here's where it happened. A bunch of Acropolis Museum, Athens this, Athens that. Çatalhöyük is a Neolithical archaeological site in Turkey. Hunterian Museum is in Scotland, and so on. Yes.
Pieces in order to fit into your story, or you kind of worked around the existing layout that was already present in the museum?
No. If it is an in situ for something, for an experience within a museum, we don't touch the exhibits. Wherever they are, we create stories based on where things are. If there is, I'll say that the key thing is we have a spectrum from truth, from fact to fiction. You can have a story that is purely fiction. You can have a story that is purely fact. And the challenge is, if you want, how you mix the fiction without touching the fact to make it more engaging. Because the fact could be, okay, 10,000 soldiers in that day went there with so much arms and so on, and they fought, blah, 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 blah. It's fact. You can make it engaging, but it's harder. But if you add fiction and you do it respectfully to the fact, unless you want to have complete, entertainment in a movie, okay? Avatar, yeah, okay, hasn't happened. You'll see that. But if you are in a barren archaeological site, that it used to be this and there are a few stones, then you can claim that this was here and that was there and so on and so forth. If whatever you have though, and you are physically there, you don't touch at all. It's the mastery of the creator to create the story where things are. Okay, so the pure narration. Hopefully I have this elsewhere as well. Otherwise I'll come back. So one story we created for the Museum of the History of the University of Athens, where Okay, the University of Athens is the oldest in Greece. A few years after the modern Greek state was formed, taking back part of what the Ottoman Turks had occupied. And the university was formed, and in the beginning, you could enter the university without, knowing where you're going. Should I be a chemist or should I be a lawyer? Okay, this was the situation. So, fiction, a fictional person is wondering, what should I study? And through that, you see the form of art. We chose, not we, the creative people that came into the picture, not the technologists. Okay, and not the museum people informed about the fact. The exhibits were there, and then the creative people came up and talked the story. We paid illustrators because we felt that this was the better one, and so it's a visit to the first Greek university through the eyes of a student in 1840. And there's illustrator, it's a mobile digital storytelling, so you do it on your mobile or your tablet, and combining facts and fiction is important. And there are various levels of narration. Okay, first one is the main character. Emmanuel is the student who doesn't know what to study. Okay, and the visitor follows his thoughts and where he's going. Well, I'm going here and here, I'll sign, and so on and so forth. And you go through the exhibits in doing this. By the way, the first thing, and it's the only aspect of that in this experience, is, well, you are following Emmanuel, who's the new student. Do you want to be a first-year student also, a male student or a female student? And then you choose. And of course, if you choose male, you say good. If you say female, it says, unfortunately, you cannot do that because in 1840, women were not allowed to study. Okay, so you learn immediately something like that. You say, my God, women were not allowed to study. So and so forth. Then we have a flash forward when Emmanuel is 60 or 70, and then he reminisces of what happened and this and that and so on. And finally, we have a neutral narrator who is the owl, and the owl is the symbol of the university, who guides into things. So our tools gave the ability to do all this. Of course, it was the creative people that took advantage of that and created the story. And here it is in situ, the virtual space. The thing is that the Museum of the History is the first building of the university. So in 1840, that was the university. Now it's a museum. So it coincides. You can do great things. Narrator, I have to expedite a little bit. There are drawings. Okay, the illustrator comes up. There are no photographs. Only if you want to look at the detail, there are photographs. So this was the artistic thing. So this is a true anatomy book, but this has been illustrated. It's not a photograph of the actual book. And this is an illustration of the building. And this is Greek. We have the Greek and the English version. Why is this not advancing? As we said, in everything that we do, the key thing is to evaluate it. Okay, there are various ways to evaluate any a system where humans are involved quickly. And now, I don't know why this was moved. Okay, maybe this, I don't know why it's not working. I'll go back. This slide should come after what I presented. We did interviews with 28 participants. Most of them had never visited the museum before, and in 2 years' time, an structural evaluation with people just wandering in the museums. Not great big numbers, but still you get up to 40 or something like this. And many participants says it helped with travel. It's an original way to learn history, the keyword learn. And overall, it was perspective and so on. It's better than museum guides, of course. The best one for me is this. An informatics researcher young, but not, 20. This was very good for me because I get bored in museums. I'm a museum hater, okay? But this, now she really loves museums. One of the things was that you need more interaction, okay? All it's great, it's fancy, and so on and so forth, but I want to be more involved. I want more agency. Why is this? Anyway. So now it is offered to museums, so it's production quality, so to speak. It's offered to visitors, all the school kids. Here it's available on Google Play, and we have some publications. So interaction, agency, what was asked from before, and what we knew also that usual interaction is important. And now there is a key thing. Interaction is not about, or give me more details about this object, or about this exhibit, or about this piece of information. Interaction is to be interacting with the plot itself, with the story itself, to be making choices. So this is another example of a story that we created, a day in the life of a servant in ancient Agora of Athens. Okay, the main thing is that the master of this servant invested in a ship, and the ship sank, and now there's economic disaster in the household. How will the servant that goes in the ancient Agora do? Interactive story. The motivation, as I said, is agency and interactivity, which is defined as the satisfying power to take meaningful action and see the results of your decision and choices. So, for example, when at some point in the story, the one of the roles in the story asks the visitor. The visitor wanders around the area of Echelon. Well, how do you feel now? Do you feel that you have to go to another? I mean, he's destroyed. You should try to go to find another master, or you want to stay and help the master, and so on and so forth. And then, depending on how you express. It's not auditory yet. I mean, you have to press or something like this. Depending on how you feel, the story moves in another path. Okay, so you interact with the plot. And you do it in a way that is immersive. You don't realize that this question will lead to a different path and so on. It doesn't ask you, do you like green or red? It asks you, oh, okay. And 7 decision points, like the one I mentioned, 15 alternate endings. So the authors of this really did the work. And we had it for on-site, but we came up with a web version as well, because all this was during... and this is, again, the story editor. This, maybe... This doesn't seem to be working. I don't know. So we evaluated 67 adults. It was very effective to promote historical empathy, and there was positive effect. Here are some numbers from the evaluation. You see? Yeah, that's okay. I can. Okay. For example, what about the fact that we're asking you, how did you feel about it? Now cannot point. Okay, you see, 61% of the people said it was interesting. It helped to get immersed. I mean, the 4 choices are positive. The top 2 are negative. Very few people said that these things were distracting. Most of them liked the interaction and their participation in the story, their emotional participation. Okay, what was the trick? Okay, sure. And then, various statements. Was it overpowered? What happened? Okay. It's moving inside, as if it's going to give birth. Yeah, it's a good story. Okay, but you see a bunch of specific questions. So the particular one, I would have liked this experience to be linear. The average, this is a 1 to 5 scoring, traditional one. So 2.5 is neutral. All the positive ones are in the high 3s. So still, I mean, you want more tools and more creativity to understand this form of art. But very high 3s, but very few responded that they didn't want it. And a bunch of things. The choices, again, you see, most of them were well-behaving. I made a choice based on what I would do. So I would be part of it and I would do it, 45%. Some, they took the role of the main character and so on. And some people were, the party poopers were randomly choosing, and here's what happened. Okay, in terms of immersion, again, a bunch of numbers. Questions, statements, you see again in the high 3s. Questions to see some of the features that you want, like believability, sensory delight, and so on. And found the story, a whole bunch of good things, concise, simple, innovative, pleasant. All the best things are high. So it's in the beginning I didn't believe this, but you can really measure the impact that these choices have. I don't have it, right? It's okay. It's dead. Or
Museum curators themselves have to think of it from the other side. This is from the audience side, but with the curators also receptive to this change.
This is the most uphill. Yeah, Jayant. Jayant asked, okay, the users were enthusiastic. What about the museum curators or directors and so on? The most uphill battle is with the content owners. Its owners in whatever sense owning would be. First of all, they believe that this introduction of the digital thing takes all the beauty away, which is not, because we combine, who asked me, I can't remember, the physical and the digital. This is critical to do it. Yes, we have the purely digital ones all over the web. I mean, what are you going to do? But this is a key thing. But also, they believe that by adding fiction, you lose. And they are convinced, but it takes, it takes a strong battle to achieve this.
Maybe I have understood. If this point has been already made, please do correct me. So I believe some of the storytelling is enhanced by the augmented reality aspect of the technology, right? As in, you bring in a phone and move to a historical object, and some amount of augmentation to that object happens, and then you have a story around it. Is that correct? As in, if I go near a sphere or a sword or something, then a story evolves around it in the museum, and then you have some props which get created in your phone or something to drive the story and have a better experience for the museum visitor.
I'm not sure I understood your question, but I'll give an answer anyway, and we'll see if my answer answers your question. Yes, you can have either physical or digital props that are part of the story and can help the story. And I give some examples later on, not until now. Also, the extended reality or augmented reality or virtual reality are a mode to create such stories, which have, and there again, you can create in a virtual space or in a real and virtual space experiences and impressions.
Yeah.
Did I answer your question?
Yeah, my question was on the second part.
I see, okay. Yes, yes, yes. Yes.
Well, I'm having difficulty placing this piece of work in terms of what you're trying to achieve, because there are two components, right? One is time to market. It's easy for people to storyboard and so on. That's one component. The other is, because it's easy, a lot of people can be creative and they can pick it up and make stories, and that's the other component, right? The evaluation seems to be around the story that has been created, which might also, like, movies can be bad and good, right? So evaluation seems to be focused on the interaction part of things, whereas the initial part, it seemed like you wanted to bridge the gap between the time to market for cost. Yeah.
I don't have numbers of I don't have the results of evaluating the creators. Let's put it this way. Because the ultimate goal is the stories that are created, and absolutely, you're right, there can be good and bad. What we are measuring is not the beauty of the creation, but the emotional engagement through the features that this creation has. Okay. So far, to tell you the truth, I mean, we haven't done thousands of stories, but in the 24 or 30 or so in various museums and points of interest and so on and so forth, nobody had said this is an uninteresting thing. Possibly because any other approach to whatever knowledge is or whatever world you're trying to engage with is much more boring, much more dry, and so on and so forth. So there's no comparison. If this catches on, and then it really becomes, you know, something common that this is, then yes, some creators will be worse than others. I mean, there's a small set of creators that we collaborate with, and they create these things that they're really good. They're not Spielbergs. They're really good. Now, we've done this with students, master students in museology, master students in archaeology. And there are numbers that show what they could do without these tools and what they are able to do with that. It's overwhelming, but it's kind of a little bit cheating, because this is a new thing, and it allows them to create so much more. So it is interesting and it's important, but from a research perspective, from the computer-human interaction perspective, the key interest was, you know, what kind of features should a story have? Okay. Okay. The genre is another thing. I mean, it could be a comedy, a drama, and so on. So that's, we don't touch this at all. Did you signal me for something? 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Okay. We'll make it 5 minutes. And also in terms of learning and historical empathy, again, a bunch of numbers. Let me show you. And we've been, you see, International Conference on Interactive Digital Storytelling. That's the conference above. A lot of Kai things and a lot of culture things. Sociality. So far, I gave you a story of someone with a mobile phone or a tablet or maybe from the web having an experience of a story. But what about if this has a social component? What is the motivation? Yes, all this, cannot point, as I said. Anyway, it's generally a single user experience. Not just our work, but also others that have done other things. This, I think we are the only team that is doing it in this way. But a museum visit, since we focus on museums, or even in that point of interest museums, usually are group activities. Yes, you may go alone to a museum and so on forth, because you came to Bangalore and you'll go if you had time to. But usually it's a group activity. And the cultural sites are social places. So the story would be good if it is a social thing as well. So we bring in sociality into the social pictures, or into the story experiences. There are two activities combined. Yes, the individual storytelling parts, where you hear, maybe the same thing as your, let's say it's 2. It can be 15 or 1,000, but let's imagine 2. You can be listening to your individually, the same thing or a different thing. But then there are interaction points, where you interact, physically or digitally. And the social interaction points can be to have a common explanation, joint reflection, conversation, okay, as part of the story, making choices together if you have interaction, and so on. And the device is the facilitator. And here is the storyboard. So you see here in the individual storytelling parts, everyone goes the same way. So you have the gray thing, and then here they need to interact. So the author has to create the two things and what the two of them will be giving. And then another one that comes from the two, and here's another interaction point, and so on. So this becomes, and for this one, an example of such a story is the one that we did in the Neolithical site. I think it's the oldest Neolithical site that is known and is preserved. It's in the middle of Turkey, and my people from my team spent quite a few summers there in Konya. So it's a personal narration of two characters, and there are social interaction points that are interweaved with the experience. And this is a picture from two people doing this. And the interaction can have multiple things. For example, there are things that were found, relics. Okay, maybe one sees some, the other sees some, others say, oh, yours, you have this thing, the other one has that, oh, this is important. Or it could be parts of the same thing that you have to put your mobiles next to each other to complete the picture. And the other one is, no, let me not, Jay and is getting, is looking at me. Or to reflect. Wow, see how these people in this, the key characteristic they found is that people had houses, and when someone from the family died, they buried them underneath the house. So on the basement, you had, tens and hundreds of skulls, and you lived above. Today, this would be unheard of. Okay, but then this was, one other key characteristic that showed the social thing is that they were, they understood that there were common things that were shared by the whole village, and they were exchanging things. So how do you put in the story this experience from that time to make it experience of the story? And it could be done with virtual things. You exchange from the two mobiles, so this object I give to you, or you put an annotation on the object and you give it, and then someone else, 5 exchanges down the road, your name is there, so you understand who had it or we had 3D printed physical objects, and as part of the story you were in a place where you were taking the 3D printed of the actual relic and you're giving it to someone else, and so on. I mean, this is art. You can create whatever you want. This is and at some points, both of them, you were seeing the same thing, and maybe you were reflecting and stuff like that. And when you combine it with interaction, the choice, how do you feel? And from both responses, the system was figuring out how to proceed. Evaluation, 108 adults, and so on and so forth. I'm showing only one result. I hardly noticed the time passing. Okay, you see, by the way, in the 108 people, half of them did social experience, half of them did non-social experience, individual experience. Let's not call it non-social. Okay, you see how many more strongly agree on that the time flies. Okay. And the same thing also, not only the time flies, but also how long they kept, because every experience, has pauses, you can stow and so on and so forth, and various comments, and a whole bunch of. So personalization, I'll go very fast. The thing is, okay, this is an eco-museum. You see now, in a modern city, it's a very industrial city, very not prosperous part, not prosperous city because of the industry that used to be there, now it's not, and so on. But also, it is on a spot that is very important archaeologically, and also very important with respect to the surrounding fauna and so on. So it's an eco-museum. How do you personalize for everyone in which of 160 spots, or not 160, 60 spots, they could go to as recommendation and so on and so forth. My team, not only this part of the team that does storytelling, but also other parts, do quite a bit of work on personalization and recommendation with recommendation algebra, so to speak, inspired by databases and query optimization, and especially transitive closure. I won't talk about that at all. The next time I'm here, I'll talk about that. And the results are, again, you see, they agree, the experience proposed, points of interest that were of interest to me. And how do you understand that? From a bunch of things you have to create as by declaring yourself, saying some things about yourself in the beginning. And then the system following you and looking at your interactions adapts to what it perceives as your interests. And in general, it was pretty good, and there are a whole bunch of numbers as well. But these are preliminary evaluations. Evaluating recommendation is hard. Extended reality, this is something that it was one of our first experiences, Museum of Acropolis, lots of statues with traces of color. We think that statues were all marble and white, but this is not the case. They had color on them, just the color faded. Okay, I've seen some modern statues in various parts of India that have bright colors in. Well, in ancient Greece and Rome and so on, I don't know if the colors were the same, but this existed. Okay, and now you can put, it's augmented reality, you still have the statue, but you put your tablet on, and with software, you see superimposed the statue with the colors as archaeological research thinks they were. And you can see that and so on. This is, and a whole bunch of other things. And virtual reality also in the Çatalhöyük this is pure virtual reality, to have props that maybe existed or you haven't found them, but you think the way they are, and you take and you give and so on and so forth. So this is, and the evaluation results, you see, in virtual reality, the first time we hit scores above 4, I hardly noticed the time. So these things, I mean, the channel and the mode, really affect how you do it. So a lot more work to do there, and details results. And you can have a story, if you're really, a creator that can handle it, that has all of these things. And our most recent story in the Athens concert hall, they had a library with many famous Greek musicians, and for one of them, we are creating a story about Nikos Kalkotas is his name, and it has both interactive digital storytelling and immersive VR in amazing, for me, images artistically, film noir aesthetics, Berlin 1930, and so on. You have both the virtual reality and the interactive. Okay, this is a picture, but this is art that one of our artists made, and then you are immersed in this area and you feel you move. So when you are in Greece, maybe you can experience some of these things. So, are we making history? I don't know. Are we rewriting the story of storytelling? I don't know. But what I can safely say is that story experiences, the way we've conceived them and enriched them, and we create them with the right creative people, are really engaging. And the evaluations show that. There's a lot more work to be done, both on the software and in the creators understanding better the medium, this form of art, to create more. I mean, when movies came out, what were they doing? They had like a theater play on stage, and they had a static camera, and people were playing, and now it was a movie. Okay, little by little they understood all of these things. Of course, none of this would have happened without my team. This is the current team. These are the creative people, the experienced designers. Okay, these are the key people. The product owner, software developers, the mind behind all the evaluations and so on and so forth, and Maria and myself leading it. Thank you.
Join me in thanking Yannis for a wonderful story with a great ending. Maybe you can have a time for just 1 or 2 questions, and afterwards I'm sure you can also email questions to him. We'd be happy to respond to them. Any
We'll
quick
have
questions? Right.
So I mean, this is very interesting. Clearly, thanks for the talk. I just wanted to think about. I was thinking about while I was listening to you about textbooks that children study in school, right? I mean, I can imagine that some of this is not specific to locations or things. I think you did talk about education somewhere in the beginning, but is that something that you're actively looking at? You know, replacing effectively textbooks by these kind of experiences for school children and things like that.
Absolutely.
Do you envision that will be the future of textbooks? Or more like
I don't know if it will be the future of textbooks, but certainly for most themes, learning them through a story, an engaging story, is much more effective, both in terms of understanding and in terms of memory and so on, like reading a book or doing something like that. We've worked with on a couple of cases with schools. Kids were enthusiastic. The teachers were enthusiastic, unlike museum curators who are, for the most part, skeptical, and I don't blame them, but they're skeptical. The teachers were exciting, and I think except for high-order math or something like this, most of the other things can be taught through this way much more effectively. So this is definitely another area that we are working on besides museum and cultural points of interest, city tours. Okay, it is we are another part of my team is involved with let me say a digital twin for the human brain, and there's tremendous research that is done there. It's very hard to explain what is done there, what is the impact that this can have. And we are contemplating of creating a story that someone can experience, but here it's not in situ, okay? It's all virtual or it is web and so on and so forth, but still have all these features of the story to explain the deep research that is happening to others so they can understand and appreciate and so on and so forth. So the sky's the limit in terms of where this can be applied.
maybe we can see a database textbook.
Okay, let's talk later about it. Sure.
One quick question. So you talked about the tools for creating the digital story. How much of this has been already open sourced?
Some of it, maybe most of it, is open source because of requirements from the projects that funded us, and it is open source. The thing is that we are evolving the software so much. I mean, the original software that developed, I mean, the augmented reality was not ours, but the story behind the augmented reality is meaningless now. So we are evolving. We're evolving it, but whatever is like that, even if it's not open source, it will be open source. Let me tell you that we are really encouraged by many to have a spin-off company and do this. And we have a business model. We are working on doing that. And this is, for all this to happen, requires 4 different people, 4 different types of people. Us, the technologists, the content owners, unless it's pure fiction, in which case you don't need any content owners. But for the most part, let's say we have this. We have the created people and we have the end user. So the 3 have to combine for the end user to pay for something and then to split. So we have a business model on all this. And if we proceed in this way, then the more advanced versions will not be open source. The way I imagine it currently. We will be offering the service to the creative people and the owners. But what we have developed so far is open source. I'm very big in open in general. Open science, open source, open access in general.
Okay. So please join me again in thanking Yannis. And as a small token of our appreciation.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed it.
Memento back.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks a lot, Jayan, for having me.
Hopefully this will be in your next story. Yes.
Okay. Can I open it?
Yes, please.
There's too many things here. Too many props. Oh.
That's the flask also, right? Yogesh, you want to open the
Okay.
There is.
Let me open this. Water is the source of life. Absolutely. Great. Art in science. Okay. This is great. You see, probably there's a story in here. Absolutely. Very nice. I love this. Thank you so much. I'll take a look, in the evening, and I'll tell you my impressions in the plane tomorrow.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you so much.